Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we'll be talking about how to draw a moose. As always, I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet, and I'm drawing straight into Photoshop. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here is the moose. Yep. So they're kind of brown. I have kind of an off, like grayish cream color for the horns. And then we'll do brown eyes unless I just decide to do a strip of like white. So, I'll get started doing the whole thing in shadow. Now when I talk about that, right, what I mean, and I'm just gonna undo something real fast, because while this is in shadow, it is his nostril, and it's making me hard for me to see it. Okay, I'm gonna take that off. What I mean is light pin pressure, right? So it's just kind of this light pin pressure, too many lines, and too much pin pressure brightens things up. So not only am I holding off how many lines, but how much pin pressure. So it's a combination of both that allows me to do the shadow. So I'm going to do the whole thing in shadow, and I don't necessarily need to stay, especially in the areas that are going to be highlight. In the areas that are in shadow, I do, but the areas in highlight, I don't need to stay within their little spots. But you can see when I take that off, you can tell where they are. So I'm just going to fill it in shadow. That makes it a lot quicker, right? So I'm just doing sort of this, right? Fully filling it in, ignoring the individual lines for now. But that's not necessarily meaning I'm ignoring the direction they're going. So I'm still following the direction, still doing the light pin pressure, and then when I get to areas that are shadowed, I do stay within the little individual lines here. But anywhere else, I do not. So I'm going to do this whole thing in brown, so I'm not going to get the horns yet. Just going to do the head and the ear, not the fluff of the ear. And I will be right back. I was trying an experiment where I was going to leave some gaps that were just black, but in the end I didn't really like that, and so I ended up just filling them in just very lightly. And I would have with filled it in with, like, you know, blue later down the line, but it just didn't quite look right. All right, so I'm gonna get the horns in. Just like with the brown of the fur, I'm gonna do all of this in shadow first, right? So just this light pin pressure. Ooh, geez, all words. Just this light pin pressure. So I'm gonna do this for both sides, and I will be right back. to add in the highlights. So for the highlights, I am going to be sticking to the little clusters of hair, right? And not only am I putting more lines, but I'm putting slightly more pin pressure. I don't have to do a ton because the lines are kind of already there, but just enough, right? And so it's just a matter of filling this in the direction these are already going. And since it's already kind of partially done, it makes it a little easier too. Right, and then if I took off everything else, right, that's what you'll get underneath. And then, you know, anywhere where there's shadow, you just leave it, right? Because we've already sketched that in. So I don't have to worry about doing anything different. I don't have to add anything to what's already here. What I will sometimes do, right, as it comes towards shadow is I'll back off on my pin pressure. So I'll add it like on the tip, just sort of lighter, or even on one that's right next to one that would have it. But otherwise, just sort of filling it in. I'm gonna get it all done in highlight, right? Because I've kind of already sketched the shadows out. That's what those are. And I will be right back. Yeah, I think this works. Okay, so now we have the horns. To get the shadows, or the, I'm sorry, shadows are in. To get the highlights and the horns come in. Now, you know, light source is coming from above and to the right. So I didn't actually sketch out where the highlights and shadows would be on the horns. Roughly, right, you're gonna have, first make sure you're on the right layer. I've done that many a time where I have not been. Right, so same kind of thing, except we're not doing the individual clumps of hair on the horns. Right, so just bring that down. Have that catching the light. All these sort of individual horns. But as it rounds away towards the back, not so much. You would lose the highlights. Right, so all through here. And then as this rounds around, right, because we have this kind of rounding away as well, the base of the horn where it's coming out also sort of going into shadow. And so all these individual horns. But the, sorry, I have to keep checking. I drew such a weird horn, it's tripping me out a little bit. Right, so the horn kind of rounds away, much like this does, just in a bigger scale. So while they'd all still be catching the light, as the base part of it kind of rounds away, you're not going to get quite as much. Right, so you have all of it up in here, and then as it starts rounding away, not as much connecting through or going down as farther, as far. And then, you know, sort of tapering that off as it goes around. And then you're going to have this kind of catching the light because it's turned inward, right? So The light source is coming from above and to the right. This is turned towards the light source, so this you'd have a nice potential burst. It doesn't have to be major, but right, and then on this side, same thing. But also keeping in mind, right, it rounds underneath, so that would also block. You'd have the horns, tips of the horns and such, but then it's rounding away and underneath. And you'll get some of this as it also rounds. Now this, unlike the other side, won't be catching as much light. Some of it for sure as it comes down, but not all of it. Well, and it depends on the angle too, because I could add more highlighting to it if I wanted to. Depends on how I want the light coming. You know, because I could filter this down. Just it. Just always consider your light source. And then filling in any gaps, right? There's a big gap here between that horn and the rest of it, between that point and the rest of it. Right, yeah, you'd probably have a gap where you have the dip in the horn of the moose, causing some shadowing. Gonna add some white fluff in the ear, right? Some of this white fluff. Just light pin pressure. It's gonna get swallowed up by the horn, gonna get disappeared by the horn. That's what I was gonna say, and then I caught myself because that's a weird way to word that. Anyway, the horn will block some of it. The antler will block some of it. Right, and the white fluff in an ear, it can be, it's not straight or uniform, or it's tends to be a little bit more wild with the hair. You can be a little bit looser with how you're drawing it in, you know. And because it's behind the antler, I don't know that it would really have all that much highlighting on it. If anything, it would be on that side, but I don't think it really is going to have a lot, so we're not going to do much with it other than put it in. Okay. So now I'm going to take an absurdly bright color, I don't know why that was hard to say, and put it on the moose in spots that of extreme highlight. So we're going to take this orange, right, and just sort of fill in on areas where it would be catching the most light. So it's not in all the spots that are highlighted, but it's going to certainly be in a few of them. Right, it just kind of adds a little burst and interest. And then after we're done with that, we'll be adding blue to the shadows. Nothing big. I don't even have to fully fill it in, just a few swipes. And then the further away from a center point I'm getting, I can go down to like just one little like swipe here or there. And I will usually always do it by an eye, because eyes are sort of a focal point for us as humans. We look at eyes, we're drawn to eyes. A little burst there, nothing big. Might have one little like swipe down here. A few random spots that might be catching. And then I'm going to do it on the horns as well. Yeah, and see, that adds a lot. Then we're going to take a blue, and it's going to be a nice bright blue. and we're gonna fill in the shadows. Right, so very light pin pressure for this because you can overdo this. Basically anywhere where there's shadowing, I'm gonna add just a burst of blue to it. So that's all I'm doing is in the shadows doing this. So I'm gonna get the shadows done, and I'll be right back. Before we're done with the blue, I am going to go through just a few spots, and there's a lot of blue, so, but in a few spots, and make some sections just a little brighter. It's not a lot, sort of picking and choosing which hairs I am, or which segments I'm doing this with. No real rhyme or reason to it other than what would be aesthetically pleasing. This doesn't have anything to do with light source or anything like that. It's just adding variety into the blue to add some interest into the drawing itself. It doesn't have to be everywhere in the shadow, but it doesn't have to stick to one section. See, that can add a lot, just doing just a few spots. Okay, so then we have the eyes. And I've already kind of chosen this brown for the eyes. So once again, make sure you're on the right layer. Draw in the pupil. I was going to have it kind of looking off, but could have it looking at us instead. Maybe just a little off. We'll see if I want it looking off after I do this. All right. I'm not filling in the whole thing, right? Just sort of doing the half. The top part will be is shadow, where the eyelid is casting a shadow onto the eye. You can fill it in. The reason I usually don't is it can, in my humble opinion, make an animal look surprised. Now a lot of highlights and shadows can fix that, but you know. Right, light source coming from above and to the right, so below and to the left of the pupil, we're going to have a burst against the pupil itself, and then on the right side against the light source, we'll have the actual iris fill in all the way underneath. Edge of the eye goes into shadow, so don't have light bumping right up to the edge. Taper that off. And then tapering off the back side as well. And then making sure, even though that would be going into shadow there, bumping it up where I need to. And we can make certain sections as bright or as not bright as we want. Make sure it looks like a pupil by the time I'm done. Okay, so then I'm going to take white and draw in the light flare. Right, so it's just a spot of white. And the eye typically goes through the iris and into the pupil. Maybe a little less dramatically. I used to do just a big circle. You can do just a big circle. But I find adding in different shapes makes it more dynamic. Adds more interest into the eye. And I will always do it down into the light, right? Like I'm not going to do it up in the blackness. All right, there we go. There is a moose. All right, so that's how you draw a moose. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.